Margaret was 65 years old, a retired schoolteacher who lived a quiet life in South Carolina. She loved the small routines that filled her days, gardening in the backyard, baking muffins for her neighbors, and reading books by the window in the soft afternoon light. But every once in a while, she felt the urge to leave her little town and go somewhere new, even if it was only for a short trip. It was her way of reminding herself that life, no matter her age, still held surprises and lessons waiting just beyond her comfort zone. On a warm afternoon in June, Margaret packed her small suitcase and boarded a bus that was headed to Atlanta. The bus was nearly full, and she found a seat near the back, clutching her purse and tucking her suitcase beneath her legs. She felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement, like a schoolgirl again. The passengers were strangers, but she had always loved observing people, their mannerisms, the stories behind their eyes, the way they carried themselves. As the bus rolled along, she noticed a young man sitting across from her. He was tall, maybe in his mid-20s, with dark skin and bright eyes that reflected both curiosity and humility. His clothes were simple, but neat, and he carried a worn backpack that looked as though it had traveled many roads with him. He smiled politely at Margaret, and she returned the smile, though quietly. Hours passed, and the bus came to a sudden halt on the side of the road. The driver explained there was a mechanical issue that would take hours to fix. Everyone groaned. Some muttered complaints under their breath, while others pulled out their phones. Margaret sighed, already feeling the ache in her legs. The young man across from her noticed her struggle as she shifted uncomfortably in her seat. With a gentle voice, he said, "Would you like some water, ma'am?" He offered her a bottle from his backpack. She hesitated at first, then accepted it with gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly. That small gesture opened the door to conversation. His name was Daniel, and he was originally from Ghana. He had come to the United States 2 years ago to pursue his studies in engineering. But life had not been easy. He worked part-time jobs, sent money back home to his family, and traveled whenever he could afford it to see places beyond his college campus. This bus ride was one of those small adventures. Margaret listened intently, fascinated by his courage and determination. In return, she shared her own stories, her years as a teacher, the hundreds of children she had guided, and the loneliness she sometimes felt after retirement. Daniel listened with respect, nodding thoughtfully. The hours stretched long, and when the bus driver announced the repairs would take longer than expected, some passengers grew frustrated. Margaret, though tired, felt strangely at ease talking with Daniel. He reminded her of the students she had once taught, but also of her own grandson who lived far away and rarely visited. When night fell, the driver finally admitted that the bus would not be able to continue. Everyone was stranded in a small rural town with few options. People scrambled to find taxis or accommodations, but there weren't many available. Margaret looked overwhelmed, unsure how she would get to Atlanta. Seeing this, Daniel quietly approached her. "If you don't mind," he said gently, "I can walk with you to the nearest inn. It's safer if we go together." Margaret hesitated, but something in his tone reassured her. They set out under the dim glow of the streetlights, her suitcase wheels bumping along the uneven pavement. Daniel carried her heavier bag without complaint, and though the walk was long, he filled the silence with stories of his childhood in Ghana, the bustling markets, his mother's cooking, the games he played with his siblings under the mango trees. Margaret, in turn, shared memories of growing up in America during a very different time, teaching children during integration, and the lessons she had learned about patience and resilience. By the time they reached the inn, the two of them felt less like strangers and more like unlikely companions. The inn had only one available room, and Margaret immediately insisted he take it. "You're young, you need your rest for tomorrow," she said firmly. But Daniel shook his head.
"No, ma'am."
"You take the room. I'll be fine in the lobby." That night, Margaret lay awake thinking about the kindness of this young man who had no obligation to help her. She realized that sometimes the world placed people in our paths not by accident, but by design, to teach us something we didn't know we needed to learn. The next morning, Daniel was waiting in the lobby, still cheerful despite the uncomfortable night. They shared breakfast together, and Margaret insisted on paying. Later, when another bus finally arrived, they boarded side by side. She found comfort knowing he was there, as though his presence shielded her from the unease of being far from home. Throughout the remainder of their journey, Daniel never once left her side. He made sure she had food, carried her bag, and even offered her his jacket when the bus grew cold. In return, Margaret offered something less tangible but equally valuable: her wisdom, her stories, and her quiet encouragement that reminded him why he had chosen to persevere in his dreams. When they finally reached Atlanta, it was time to part ways. Margaret held his hand and looked him in the eye. "Daniel," she said softly, "the world needs more young men like you. Don't ever lose that kindness of yours." Daniel smiled, humbled. "And the world needs more people like you, ma'am. You reminded me of my own grandmother. She always said kindness is the greatest legacy we can leave." They hugged briefly, and though they went their separate ways, the memory of that journey stayed with both of them forever. Margaret returned to her quiet life with a renewed sense of hope, while Daniel carried her encouragement in his heart as he faced the challenges of his future. Their paths had crossed by chance, but what they shared was proof that human connection, no matter age, race, or background, could change lives in ways no one could predict. And so, the 65-year-old woman and the young African traveler became a reminder that kindness on the road can turn a journey into a lesson and a chance meeting into a lasting story worth telling.